I still remember the exact moment my heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. Standing on a rickety ladder in Building B's hallway, my blue maintenance uniform stained with grease, I overheard my daughter's voice from the courtyard below. "At least I'm not some useless old dropout like my dad." Her friends laughed as she continued. "Sometimes I tell people he died instead. It's easier than explaining why my father wears a janitor's uniform at the university I attend." What Ellie didn't know, what no one knew, was that my name was carved in limestone at the university entrance. The Whitman Institute for Human Development. My creation. My atonement. For 18 years I'd kept this secret, watching my daughter grow from the shadows, honoring my late wife's wish that Ellie find her own path, unburdened by wealth or obligation. But secrets have a way of surfacing, and when my troubled nephew threatened to expose everything, I faced an impossible choice: continue the deception that was breaking my daughter's heart, or reveal a truth that might destroy her faith in me forever. If you've ever sacrificed everything for someone you love, only to have them look at you with shame instead of understanding, this story might break your heart, but I promise, it might also help put it back together. Follow my channel for more stories that remind us that love sometimes speaks in silence, and the greatest gifts are often the ones we never see. Like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I still remember that day like it was etched into my skin. The fluorescent light flickered above me as I balanced on that rickety ladder in Building B's hallway. My blue maintenance uniform was stained with grease, badges of honor from fixing the heating system earlier that morning. 58 years old, and there I was, still changing light bulbs while younger men sat in offices with their names on the door. I didn't mind though. Not really. There was a peace in being invisible, in watching life unfold around you while no one watches back. That's when I heard her laugh. My Ellie. It floated through the open window from the courtyard below, musical and sharp all at once. I hadn't heard her laugh like that in years, not since she was a little girl with pigtails and dreams of becoming an astronaut veterinarian, whatever that meant. I turned my head slightly, careful not to lose my balance. There she was, standing with two other girls, the kind with expensive highlights and shoes that cost more than my monthly rent. My daughter had blossomed into a beautiful young woman, her mother's cheekbones and my stubborn chin creating a face that turned heads. But in that moment, something in her expression made my blood run cold. She was pointing in my direction, not directly at me, but at the maintenance man, the nobody, the dropout. "At least I'm not some useless old dropout like my dad," she said, her voice carrying on the autumn breeze. "Can you believe he actually thinks I respect what he does, cleaning up after everyone else's messes?" The other girls laughed. That particular kind of laughter that costs nothing, because it's at someone else's expense. I watched my daughter toss her hair back, chin raised with pride as she delivered the final blow. "Sometimes I tell people he died instead. It's easier than explaining why my father wears a janitor's uniform at the university I attend." The words hit me harder than when I fell off the loading dock last winter and cracked 2 ribs. But I didn't flinch, didn't call out, didn't let the lamp in my hand drop, though my fingers suddenly felt numb and distant from my body. I couldn't drop that lamp. I donated it after all. Just like I donated the mahogany furniture in the library, the endowment for faculty research, and the entire parcel of land the university was built upon. But she never knew, and I never told her. Because being a father, a real father, sometimes means accepting invisibility. They walked away, their laughter fading like the sunset. I finished installing the bulb with hands that refused to tremble. Professional pride, perhaps, or just decades of practice at swallowing pain. That night I locked myself in the small maintenance room that had become my sanctuary over the years. Pulled out the metal box where I kept my most precious belongings, my late wife's will, the first draft of the university project sketched on the back of a diner placemat, and a photo of little Ellie wearing a lab coat made of cardboard. "Dr. Ellie's hospital," she'd written in crooked crayon letters, "where even broken hearts get fixed." I had sworn to never reveal anything, to honor Ava's dying wish that our daughter grow up normal, unburdened by wealth or obligation. "Let her find her own way," Ava had whispered from her hospital bed. "Promise me she'll never feel she owes anything to anyone." I'd kept that promise for 18 years, through birthdays spent watching from a distance, through her graduation, where I stood in the back row while other parents cheered from reserved front seats. through every Christmas where my gift was wrapped in brown paper rather than designer packaging. But something changed inside me that day. A small crack appeared in the foundation of my sacrifice. I needed to tell someone, anyone, even if it's just you, listening to this story now. Because my story isn't just about an ungrateful daughter. It's about everything I've held in silence out of love. Maybe that's why I'm finally speaking now. Because silence, however noble, eventually demands its price. And mine had come due on that autumn afternoon, under a freshly changed light bulb, wearing a uniform stained with the day's honest work. I closed the metal box that night but left open something else. A door I'd kept locked for nearly 2 decades. A truth that would change everything. For Ellie, for the university, and most of all, for the tired old man everyone called Mr. Witt, the shortened version of Whitman, the name carved into stone at the university's entrance that no one ever connected to the man who swept beneath it. The next morning would bring decisions I never wanted to make. But as I fell asleep in my small trailer on the edge of town, I already knew. Some secrets aren't meant to be kept forever, even when keeping them was the greatest act of love I'd ever known. Around campus, everyone knew me as Mr. Witt, just a simple abbreviation of Whitman, my surname hidden behind the facade of a maintenance man who fixed leaky pipes and changed light bulbs. What no one realized was that the full legal name of the institution carved into the limestone archway at the entrance was the Whitman Institute for Human Development. The irony wasn't lost on me. Every morning, hundreds of students walked beneath my name without ever connecting it to the man who unclogged their toilets or swept their hallways. But that's exactly how I wanted it. When I founded this place using my parents' life insurance money and years of working night shifts driving trucks across state lines, I deliberately disappeared behind a network of anonymous donations and shell corporations. Being the janitor gave me peace. It let me watch Ellie grow from a distance, never imposing the burden of my sacrifice on her young shoulders. My office, if you could call it that, was a cramped maintenance closet in the basement of the Sciences building. The walls were lined with shelves of cleaning supplies, tools, and spare parts. But hidden behind a loose ceiling panel was a small safe containing the only copies of the original university charter, with my signature on every page. Sometimes late at night, when the campus grew quiet, I'd pull out those documents just to remind myself that it had all been real, that I hadn't dreamed it. That particular Tuesday morning, I was fixing a broken lock on one of the laboratory doors when Dean Mullen approached me, his expensive Italian shoes clicking against the polished floor. His silver hair was perfectly styled as always, and his tailored suit probably cost more than I made in 3 months. In his hand was a manila envelope, and his expression was stern enough to make my stomach tighten. "Mr. Witt," he said, not bothering to soften his authoritative tone even though we'd known each other for over a decade. "I need to speak with you about something important." I wiped my hands on a rag and nodded respectfully. "Yes, sir." "Something need fixing?" "Not exactly." His eyes narrowed slightly. "It seems we have an issue with one of the older endowment funds, specifically Fund W13. My hands froze mid-motion. W13 was one of the code designations used for donations tied to my hidden identity. It was the account that paid for the new research laboratory equipment my daughter Ellie used in her advanced biology courses. "I'm not sure I understand, sir," I replied, carefully keeping my expression neutral while my heart hammered against my ribs. "I just fix things. Don't know much about money matters." Dean Mullen studied me for a moment longer than comfortable. "Perhaps not, but I find it curious that maintenance records show you were present in the administrative building after hours last month, the same night some files were accessed in the financial office." The accusation hung in the air between us. I had indeed been there, checking that the donations for Ellie's scholarship remained anonymous, making sure the financial aid paperwork showed her receiving merit-based assistance rather than revealing the truth. "Just fixing the thermostat, sir," I said, gesturing to my toolbox. "Gets cold in those offices at night." He didn't believe me. I could see it in the hard set of his jaw, the calculating look in his eyes. This wasn't a coincidence. This investigation appearing the same day my daughter had publicly humiliated me. And it wasn't the first time Dean Mullen seemed determined to dig too deeply into certain accounts. "Well," he said finally, tucking the envelope under his arm, "I'm conducting a thorough audit of all anonymous endowments. The board has questions about the source of certain funds. We live in an age of transparency, after all." Transparency. The very thing I'd spent 18 years avoiding. After he left, I sat on an overturned bucket in my closet office, hands trembling slightly. The walls seemed to close in around me. Dean Mullen had been appointed 3 years ago, replacing the previous administrator who had respected my anonymity. This new man was ambitious, hungry for recognition. If he discovered the truth, my phone vibrated in my pocket, an ancient flip model I kept for emergencies. The number was unfamiliar, but I answered anyway. "Uncle James, it's me, Travis." My throat went dry. Travis, my nephew. The last time we'd spoken, he'd stolen $3,000 from my trailer and disappeared to fund his addiction. That was 5 years ago. "How did you get this number?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "That doesn't matter," he said, and I could hear street noise in the background. "What matters is that I know about Fund W13. I know it's yours." My blood turned to ice. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do. And before you hang up," his voice took on a sinister edge that made my skin crawl. "I know Ellie is Ava's daughter, and I know what happened in 1996. My legs gave out, and I sank to the floor, back against the wall. The mention of Ava, my departed wife, and that cursed year pulled me back to memories I'd fought to keep buried. How could Travis know? How could anyone know? "What do you want?" I whispered, already knowing the answer. "A deal," he said simply. "A position at the university. A degree without having to study. Easy access to your world. Or I tell your daughter that you're the actual owner of everything. That you've been lying to her all her life." The line went dead, and I sat there in the darkness of my closet, surrounded by mops and buckets, wondering how the careful fortress I'd built around my secret life was suddenly crumbling from all sides. First Ellie's words in the courtyard, then Dean Mullen's investigation, and now Travis's blackmail. For the first time in 18 years, I wondered if silence had been the right choice after all. If Ava's dying wish had been worth the price we were all now paying. The campus coffee shop was nearly empty that Wednesday afternoon. Rain tapped against the windows in a steady rhythm, creating a gray curtain that separated the small, warm interior from the cold world outside. I sat in the corner booth, my calloused hands wrapped around a chipped mug of black coffee, waiting. 5 years is a long time. Long enough for a person to change entirely, or perhaps to simply become more of who they truly were. When Travis pushed through the door, shaking raindrops from his jacket, I barely recognized him. The scrawny, fidgety kid who had once stolen from me had filled out. His face was fuller, his eyes clearer, but there was something harder about him now. Something calculated. "Uncle James," he said, sliding into the seat opposite me. No hug, no warmth, just the cold formality of someone conducting business. I studied him carefully. "You look better than last time I saw you." A thin smile crossed his face. "Clean for 3 years now. Found Jesus in a rehab center in Arizona." He tapped his fingers on the table. "Funny how getting sober makes you remember all sorts of things." "Like what?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Like finding those papers in Aunt Ava's old desk. The ones about the Whitman Foundation. About how you set up the university." His voice lowered. "About how you've been playing janitor while secretly owning the whole damn place." My stomach clenched. Those papers were supposed to have been destroyed after Ava's death. I'd sworn her sister had burned them all. "And what exactly do you think you know about 1996? I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. Travis leaned forward, his eyes suddenly alive with the thrill of power. "I know about the accident, the one that wasn't really an accident." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I know about Richard Campbell and what really happened that night at Lake Easton. I know why you walked away from your real life and decided to play pretend as a janitor." The name hit me like a physical blow. Richard Campbell. I hadn't heard it spoken aloud in decades. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth as memories flooded back. The screech of tires, the crash of metal, the surface of the lake rippling under moonlight as a car slowly sank beneath its surface. "You were just a child," I said. "You couldn't possibly remember that." "I don't," he admitted. "But Aunt Meredith kept a journal. Very detailed. Found it when she died last year." He smiled again. "Amazing what people write down, isn't it?" Meredith, Ava's older sister, the only other person who knew everything, the one who had promised to take all my secrets to her grave. Apparently, she'd taken them to her journal instead. "So here's what's going to happen," Travis continued, signaling the barista for a coffee. "I need a position at the university, something respectable, an office with my name on it, and I need a degree, A master's, I think, in business administration. You can't just get a degree without earning it, I protested weakly. He laughed. Uncle James, you bought an entire university. I think you can manage a single diploma. His expression hardened. Unless you'd prefer I have a little chat with Ellie. Tell her who her father really is, what he really did. The barista brought his coffee, and Travis thanked her with a charming smile that vanished the moment she walked away. I watched his face transform back into that calculating mask and realized how dangerous he truly was. This wasn't just about blackmail. There was something deeper, something personal fueling his resentment. Why are you doing this? I asked quietly. If you need money, this isn't about money. He cut me off. This is about family, about how you cut us all off after Ava died, about how you played poor while sitting on millions. His fingers tightened around his mug. About how you gave everything to Ellie while the rest of us got nothing. The unfairness of his accusation burned in my chest. I'd given nothing to Ellie directly. That was the whole point. She'd earned her place here, believing she was on scholarship, working part-time jobs to cover expenses. Meanwhile, Travis and his mother had received monthly support checks for years until he stole from me and she refused to make him return the money. Your mother received support until you were 25, I reminded him. The agreement, he spat, was made when no one knew you were worth millions, when everyone thought you were just a truck driver who got lucky with a small inheritance. He leaned in closer. But that wasn't true, was it? The money didn't come from your parents. It came from the settlement, from Campbell's family, paying you to keep quiet about what really happened that night. The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too public. A student at a nearby table glanced our way, and I lowered my voice. You don't know what you're talking about, I whispered. And if you did, you'd understand why things happened the way they did. Maybe I would, Travis shrugged. But I don't really care about your reasons. I care about what you're going to do now. He pulled out his phone and showed me an email draft, addressed to Ellie. Subject line, the truth about your father. I took the liberty of finding her email through the university directory. He said casually, one press of this button and everything changes. For her, for you, for this whole place. My mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. If Ellie learned the truth this way, through the vengeful words of a nephew she barely knew, it would destroy what little relationship we had left. And if the board discovered the deception I'd maintained for nearly 2 decades, the legal implications could threaten the university itself. I need time, I said finally, to figure out how to make this work. Travis slipped his phone back into his pocket, a satisfied smile playing at his lips. You have 3 days. By Saturday, I want confirmation of my new position and enrollment. He stood, leaving his coffee mostly untouched. And Uncle James, don't try anything clever. I have backups of everything. If anything happens to me, if I don't get what I want, those files go to Ellie, the board, and the local newspaper. He walked out into the rain, leaving me alone with a cold cup of coffee, and the weight of my past pressing down on me harder than ever before. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from the head of maintenance asking where I was. My absence had been noticed. My double life was fraying at the edges. As I walked back to campus in the rain, not bothering with an umbrella, I wondered what Ava would say if she could see me now. If the sacrifice we'd made together, the promise to give Ellie a normal life, was about to crumble because of secrets that should have stayed buried with the past. That night, I drove my rusted pickup truck along the winding road that led away from the university campus, past the affluent neighborhoods where professors lived in their well-maintained colonials, beyond the apartment complexes where students threw Friday night parties. 10 miles out, the road narrowed and turned to gravel as civilization gave way to a cluster of oak trees sheltering a small trailer park. My home for the past 18 years sat at the far end, a double-wide with faded blue siding and a small wooden deck I'd built myself one summer. Nothing fancy, but it was clean and paid for. Most importantly, it was the last place anyone would look for the founder of a prestigious university. Rain continued to fall, drumming against the metal roof as I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The space was cramped but tidy. A small kitchenette to the left, a living area with a worn leather recliner, and a hallway leading to a bedroom and bathroom. In the corner sat my father's old roll-top desk, its oak surface polished from years of use. I shrugged off my wet jacket and hung it by the door. The day's events swirled in my mind like leaves caught in a storm drain. Ellie's cruel words, Dean Mullen's suspicious questions, Travis's blackmail. My carefully constructed world was collapsing around me, and I had no idea how to hold it together. With heavy steps, I walked to the bedroom closet and pulled out an old metal lockbox from the highest shelf. The key hung on a chain around my neck, hidden beneath my maintenance uniform each day. I unlocked the box and carefully lifted out its contents. A stack of letters tied with faded blue ribbon, a few old photographs, and a sealed envelope that had remained untouched for nearly 2 decades. Carrying everything to the kitchen table, I sat down and gently untied the ribbon. These were the letters Ava had written during her final months, when she knew the cancer would take her but pretended for Ellie's sake that it was just a bad flu. Our daughter had been only 5 then, too young to understand that her mother was slipping away forever, too young to carry the burden of grief. I arranged the letters chronologically, a habit formed from reading them so many times over the years. Each one was dated, the handwriting growing shakier as the weeks progressed. I could still remember finding them, hidden in books, tucked under my pillow, slipped into my lunchbox. Little pieces of Ava trying to stay with me even as she was leaving. But it was the sealed envelope that drew my attention now. Unlike the others, this one had never been opened. It was addressed simply, "For Ellie, when she's ready." Ava had given it to me 2 days before she died, her eyes clear despite the morphine. "Promise me you'll give this to her when the time is right," she had whispered, her once strong hand barely able to squeeze mine. "When she needs to understand." I had promised. And for 18 years I had carried that promise, waiting for a moment that never seemed to arrive. Now, with Travis's threats hanging over me and Ellie's contempt still fresh in my mind, I wondered if that moment had finally come. With trembling fingers, I held the envelope to the light as if I could somehow see through the paper to the words inside. I knew what it contained, or at least I thought I did. Ava's explanation of our choices, her wish that Ellie grow up normal, unburdened by wealth or obligation, the truth about the university and my role in its creation. In that letter, Ava explained everything, how my renunciation had built this institution, how she herself had asked that I never reveal the truth, so that Ellie could grow without carrying guilt or debt. That letter could end everything, or save everything. I placed the envelope on the table and stared at it for what felt like hours, the rain providing a soundtrack to my indecision. If I gave this to Ellie now, would she understand? Or would she see it as just another deception? A convenient prop in a story too unbelievable to be true? My phone buzzed again. Another message from work. A pipe had burst in the humanities building. They needed me. Always needed me. The invisible man who kept everything running. I tucked the letter into my shirt pocket and headed back out into the rain. Some decisions couldn't be made alone in a trailer. Some needed the clarity that came only from doing what you've always done, fixing what's broken, one small piece at a time. The next morning dawned gray and misty, the kind of half-hearted daybreak that makes you want to stay in bed. But habit pulled me up at 5 a.m. as it always did. I showered, dressed in my blue uniform, and made a pot of coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in. The envelope sat on my kitchen table where I'd left it after returning late the night before, still sealed, still waiting. This time, I slipped it into my breast pocket before heading to campus. The weight of it seemed to grow with each mile, pressing against my heart like a stone. The humanities building was a mess. Water damage had warped some of the hardwood flooring, and several offices had suffered minor flooding. I spent the morning directing a cleanup crew, assessing damage, and reassuring anxious professors that their precious books and papers would be salvaged. It was nearly noon when I saw Ellie crossing the administration quad. She walked with purpose, her backpack slung over one shoulder, hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Even from a distance, I could see Ava in her, the determined set of her jaw, the graceful way she moved. I stepped back into the shadow of a column, a reflex developed over years of watching her from afar. But today, something drew my gaze across the quad to the faculty offices. Professor Abraham was standing at his window watching me watch Ellie. When our eyes met, he gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Abraham was the only one who knew the truth. He'd been Ava's friend long before I met her, had stood by us through her illness, had helped design the university's original curriculum. He never betrayed my secret, never treated me as anything other than the maintenance man I pretended to be. But in private moments when no one else was around, he called me Mr. Whitman. a small acknowledgement of the truth we both carried. As I watched, Ellie climbed the steps to the administration building and disappeared inside. A moment later, I saw her through the window, handing a document to Professor Abraham. He smiled at her, then glanced my way again. That same subtle nod communicating something I couldn't quite understand. The letter felt heavier than ever in my pocket. Tomorrow, I decided. Tomorrow I would find a way to give it to her, before Travis could poison everything with his half-truths and resentments, before Dean Mullen dug too deep into funds that were never meant to be scrutinized. Tomorrow, after 18 years of silence, Ava's voice would finally be heard. The Frederick Mason Auditorium stood as the crown jewel of the university's architecture, a sweeping space of polished wood and soaring ceilings, named after a wealthy donor who had contributed exactly nothing to its construction. I knew this because I had signed the checks myself, through one of my shell corporations, while the board happily accepted Mason's much smaller donation in exchange for the naming rights. Such was the game of academic politics. I was backstage, ostensibly fixing a loose railing, when students began filing in for the afternoon's honors ceremony. From my vantage point in the shadows, I could see the stage where 30 of the university's top students would receive special recognition for their academic achievements. Ellie would be among them, third in her class, with a double major in molecular biology and economics. Pride swelled in my chest, tempered by the bittersweet knowledge that I would be watching from the margins. Again, as always, Professor Abraham found me there, pretending to tighten bolts that were already secure. He approached casually, his tweed jacket worn at the elbows, wire-rimmed glasses perched on his nose. At 72, he was the oldest active faculty member, respected by students and colleagues alike for his brilliant mind and compassionate teaching style. "Afternoon, Mr. Whit," he said loudly enough for others to hear, then lowered his voice. "Do you have a moment to discuss a maintenance issue in my office later?" I nodded, recognizing the code we'd developed over the years. "Yes, sir. After the ceremony?" "Perfect." He hesitated, then added, "Your daughter looks lovely today. You should be very proud." Before I could respond, he was gone, moving toward the stage where other faculty members were gathering. I remained in the shadows, my hands gripping the railing I'd been pretending to fix. Abraham never mentioned Ellie to me in public, never acknowledged our relationship. Something had changed. The ceremony began with Dean Mullen's self-congratulatory speech about excellence and tradition. I half-listened while scanning the crowd for Travis, worried he might have decided to accelerate his timeline, but my nephew was nowhere to be seen. One by one, students were called to the stage to receive their honors. When Ellie's name was announced, my heart swelled. She walked with poise, her black dress simple but elegant, her smile confident as she accepted the certificate and shook Dean Mullen's hand. Ellie Whitman, the dean had called her, not knowing that he was announcing the true heir to the university's founder, not knowing that her father was watching from backstage, in a maintenance uniform stained with yesterday's pipe leak. As the ceremony continued, I noticed Abraham whispering something to the department chair seated beside him, then to another faculty member. Glances were cast in my direction, subtle but noticeable. My stomach tightened with apprehension. The final student received their recognition, and Dean Mullen stepped forward to deliver closing remarks. But before he could speak, Abraham rose from his seat and approached the podium. This wasn't on the program. I could see the confusion on Mullen's face, the slight annoyance at having his moment interrupted. "If I might say a few words," Abraham said into the microphone, his voice carrying through the auditorium with the authority of his decades at the institution. Mullen stepped back, clearly displeased but unwilling to create a scene. "Before we conclude today's ceremony, I would like to acknowledge someone whose contribution to this university has gone unrecognized for far too long." My blood turned to ice. No, he couldn't be doing this. Not now, not here. For 18 years, this individual has been the bedrock upon which our institution stands. He moves among us daily, largely unseen, entirely unacknowledged. The audience stirred, confused murmurs rippling through the crowd. On stage, Ellie sat with the other honored students, her brow furrowed in puzzlement. He is here today, as he is every day, wearing a blue uniform. Eyes began turning, scanning the auditorium, looking for someone in maintenance attire. I stepped further back into the shadows, my heart hammering against my ribs. Mr. Whit is more than our custodian. He is the foundation upon which everything you see was built. Silence fell over the crowd like a heavy blanket. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. On stage, Ellie had gone pale, her eyes searching the edges of the auditorium until they found me, half hidden in the wings. Few of you know him by name. Fewer still have ever thanked him for his service, but make no mistake, without his daily dedication, his unfailing commitment to excellence, this university would not function. Relief flooded through me as I realized Abraham wasn't revealing everything. He was acknowledging me, yes, but not as the founder, simply as the dedicated maintenance man who kept the place running. A public thank you, nothing more. The audience broke into applause, hesitant at first, then growing stronger. Faculty members stood, then students. A standing ovation for the invisible man who fixed their leaky faucets and changed their light bulbs. All except Ellie. She remained seated, her face a mask of confusion and dawning horror as she stared at me. In that moment, I knew she was putting pieces together, connecting dots she'd never seen before. The way Abraham looked at me with respect rather than condescension. The way I seemed to know every inch of the campus better than anyone. The coincidence of our shared last name, which he had always attributed to simple chance. "Would you join us on stage, Mr. Witt?" Abraham was saying, gesturing toward me. I shook my head, remaining in the shadows. This much attention was already more than I could bear, more than was safe. The ceremony concluded, and people began filing out of the auditorium. I slipped away through the service corridors, needing to escape before anyone could corner me with questions I couldn't answer. But as I reached the maintenance exit, a voice stopped me. "Dad." Ellie stood in the dim hallway, her honors certificate clutched in one hand. I couldn't read her expression. Anger, confusion, embarrassment. "What was that about?" she demanded. "Why would Professor Abraham single you out like that? What aren't you telling me?" The letter burned in my pocket. Now was the moment, the perfect opportunity to give her Ava's words, to let her mother explain what I never could. But before I could reach for it, my phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. "Saw the ceremony. Touching. You have until tomorrow noon, or Ellie learns everything." Not from a letter, from me. T. I looked up from the screen to find Ellie watching me. Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Nothing," I said, the lie bitter on my tongue. "Abraham just appreciates that I've been here so long. That's all." She didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes. The same penetrating gaze Ava had used whenever she caught me in a half-truth. "Right," she said coldly. Well, it was humiliating. In front of everyone. My father, the janitor, getting a pity acknowledgement. Each word was a knife, but I stood there and took it, as I always had. For her sake. For Ava's. "Congratulations on your honor," I said quietly. "Your mother would have been proud." I walked away before she could see the tears threatening to spill. Behind me, I heard her angry breathing, felt her eyes burning into my back, but she didn't follow, and I didn't look back. In that moment, I realized that 18 years of silence had built a wall between us that might be impossible to tear down, even with the truth. The rain returned that evening, battering against the windows of my trailer with a fury that matched the storm inside me. I sat at my small kitchen table, a half-eaten microwave dinner pushed to the side, staring at my phone. 3 missed calls from Professor Abraham, a text from the maintenance supervisor asking if I was ill, and nothing from Ellie. I couldn't shake the image of her face in that dim hallway. The confusion, the embarrassment, the flash of something deeper that might have been hurt. For 18 years, I'd told myself that my silence was a gift to her. Now I was beginning to wonder if it had actually been the cruelest kind of theft, robbing her of the truth about who she was, who I was, what our family had built. The ancient wall clock above my sink ticked steadily, marking time as I sat frozen in indecision. At 9:43 p.m., my phone rang again. Not Abraham this time, but Martin Schaefer, the attorney who had helped establish the original foundation and who still managed the legal structures that kept my identity hidden. "James," he said when I answered, his voice tight with concern. "We have a situation." My grip on the phone tightened. "What kind of situation?" "Someone tried to access Fund W13 today, not just routine inquiries like Mullen has been making. An actual transfer attempt." I closed my eyes, willing my racing heart to slow. "Travis, you know who it was?" Martin sounded surprised. The paperwork was submitted under Dean Mullen's authorization, but the signature was clearly forged. Sloppy work, honestly. Travis had clearly decided not to wait for my answer. He was making his move, using what he'd learned about the financial structure to try and force my hand. What happened? I asked, already knowing that if Travis had succeeded, Martin wouldn't be calling me. He'd be calling the police. The transfer was blocked, of course, but here's where it gets interesting. I heard the rustle of papers through the phone. When our system attempted to verify the authorization, it flagged something else. The administrative access to Fund W13 was changed 3 days ago. My breath caught. Changed how? The name of the administrator was updated. And guess who now has full legal control over the university's largest endowment fund? A chill ran down my spine. Who? Your daughter, Ellie Whitman. The room seemed to tilt around me. That's impossible. I never authorized that change. No, you didn't, Martin confirmed. Abraham did. Using the contingency protocol we established when the foundation was created. The one that allows him to transfer control to your heir, in case you were no longer able to manage things. Professor Abraham. Of course. His strange behavior at the ceremony, the way he'd been watching me and Ellie, the public acknowledgement that seemed to come out of nowhere. He must have sensed something was wrong. Perhaps noticed Dean Mullen's investigations or even encountered Travis himself. Is it legal? I asked. Completely. The paperwork is flawless. Ellie now controls the largest segment of the university's endowment, though she doesn't know it yet. All communications are still routed through the foundation's office. I ran a hand over my face, feeling the rough stubble of a day spent too busy for personal care. So what happens now? That depends on you, James. Ellie can't access the funds without being informed of her role, and only you or Abraham can authorize that notification. My mind raced through possibilities. If Ellie suddenly learned she controlled millions in university funds but still didn't know the full truth about my role, it would create more questions than answers. Yet it also provided a measure of protection against Travis's scheme. He couldn't steal what was no longer under my direct control. Thank you, Martin. I need to think about this. Don't think too long, he warned. Whoever tried to access those funds will try again, and next time, they might be smarter about it. After hanging up, I paced the small confines of my trailer, the floorboards creaking beneath my weight. The letter from Ava still sat on the table where I'd placed it after returning home, its sealed edge gleaming under the kitchen light like a challenge. Just as I reached for it, a sharp knock at my door froze me in place. No one visited me here. No one except... I opened the door to find Ellie standing in the rain, her hair plastered to her face, eyes red-rimmed from either crying or the weather, perhaps both. In her trembling hands, she held a piece of paper that had been torn in half and hastily taped back together. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice breaking. She thrust the paper at me, not waiting for an invitation inside. I recognized it immediately. The letterhead of the Whitman Foundation, a partial document showing fund allocations for the university's science building renovation, the project that had been completed last year to expand the laboratory facilities Ellie used for her research. "Where did you get this?" I asked, stepping back to let her in from the rain. "It doesn't matter." She stalked past me, dripping water onto my worn carpet. "What matters is what it says. The Whitman Foundation. My name. The same as the university's original name. And your signature, Dad. Your signature on a document authorizing millions of dollars." My heart sank. Travis must have decided that waiting until tomorrow was too long. He'd found a way to get information to Ellie, just enough to confuse and anger her, but not the complete truth. "Sit down," I said quietly. "Please." She remained standing, her body rigid with anger and confusion. "Have you been lying to me my entire life? Are we rich? Is that why you've been pretending to be a janitor? Some weird social experiment?" "It's not like that," I began, but she cut me off. "Then what is it like? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my father, the man I've pitied and yes, sometimes been ashamed of, has been playing some sick game for years, watching me struggle through school, work part-time jobs, apply for scholarships, all while you had, what? Millions hidden away?" The injustice of her assumption stung, but I understood it. Without context, without the whole story, what else could she think? The money was never for us to live on, I tried to explain. It was dedicated to the university, to education, to giving opportunities to students who deserved them. Like me? Her voice turned bitter. Did I get into Whitman because I earned it or because my daddy owns the place? You earned everything, I insisted, stepping toward her. Your admission, your scholarships, your honors, all of it was on merit. I made sure of it. She laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. You made sure of it? So you did pull strings. You did manipulate my entire life. Ellie, please. I reached for the letter on the table. Ava's letter that could explain everything better than I ever could. There's something you need to read, something from your mother. At the mention of Ava, Ellie's expression shifted. For a moment, the anger gave way to something more vulnerable. She had been only 5 when Ava died, old enough to remember her, but young enough that those memories had grown hazy with time. I held out the sealed envelope. She wrote this for you before she died. Asked me to give it to you when the time was right. Ellie stared at it, her hand still clutching the torn foundation document. Slowly, she reached out and took the envelope, turning it over to see her name written in Ava's elegant handwriting. Why now? She whispered. Why not years ago? Because she asked me to wait until you needed to understand. Until you were ready. I swallowed hard. I think that time is now. With trembling fingers, she broke the seal and pulled out several pages of delicate stationery. As she began to read, I turned away, giving her privacy with her mother's last words. The clock ticked. Rain drummed against the roof, and my daughter's ragged breathing filled the small space between us. When I heard the first sob, I turned back. Ellie had sunk onto my worn sofa, the letter crumpled in her fist, tears streaming down her face. This is all a lie, she said, her voice shaking. It has to be. It's not, I said softly. Every word is true. She looked up at me, her expression raw with betrayal. She says you gave up everything, that you built the university with money that should have been ours, that you've been hiding all these years because she asked you to let me have a normal life. Her voice hardened, but there was nothing normal about growing up with a father who chose to be invisible. Before I could respond, she was on her feet, ripping the letter into pieces, shredding Ava's careful explanations into confetti that fluttered to the floor like dying butterflies. Ellie, don't. 18 years, she said, her voice eerily calm as she continued tearing. 18 years of lies, of watching you scrub toilets when you could have been, what? A respected university president? A philanthropist? A father I could have been proud of instead of pitied? Each word cut deeper than the last. I reached for her, trying to save the remnants of Ava's letter, but she stepped back. I studied here on a lie, she continued. I earned honors in a building you probably paid for. My whole life has been some weird atonement you've been performing for reasons that don't even make sense. Your mother wanted— My mother is dead, she shouted, the words echoing in the small space. She doesn't get to decide from the grave that we live like paupers while you play secret billionaire. She stormed to the door, the torn pieces of Ava's letter scattered behind her like breadcrumbs I could never follow back to the truth. I never want to see you again, she said, her hand on the doorknob. Not as a janitor, not as whatever you really are. You're dead to me too. The door slammed behind her, rattling the thin walls of my trailer. Through the window, I watched her run to her car, the rain washing away tears she would never admit to shedding. And as her taillights disappeared down the gravel road, I knelt to gather the fragments of Ava's final gift, knowing some things, once broken, can never truly be made whole again. 3 weeks passed like a slow-moving fog. I went through the motions, fixing leaky pipes, changing fluorescent tubes, unclogging toilets, but my mind was elsewhere. In the spaces between tasks, I found myself wandering to places on campus where Ellie might be, then deliberately turning away. The greenhouse where she conducted research, the corner of the library where she preferred to study, the coffee shop where she met friends between classes. The trailer seemed even smaller now, its walls pressing in on me during the long evenings. I'd gathered the shredded pieces of Ava's letter and attempted to reassemble them, spending hours at my kitchen table with tape and tweezers, piecing together fragments of my wife's final words to our daughter. But too many pieces were missing, lost in Ellie's anger or crushed beneath her departing footsteps. What remained were disjointed phrases that only deepened the ache in my chest. Wanted you to find your own way. Your father sacrificed everything so that you could. Never doubt that you were loved beyond measure. Professor Abraham called daily at first. Then every few days as it became clear I had little to report. The situation with Fund W13 had been temporarily secured. Travis's attempt to access the money had been blocked and additional security measures put in place. But we both knew it was only a matter of time before my nephew tried again, with more sophistication or more desperation. "Have you spoken to Ellie?" Abraham asked during our most recent call. "No," I admitted, staring out the small window of my trailer at the evening rain. "She made it clear she doesn't want to hear from me. She's confused, James. Angry. And she has every right to be. I know. But she deserves the full truth, not pieces of it delivered by people with their own agendas." I sighed, watching raindrops trace paths down the glass, merging and separating like the complications of my own life. "What would you have me do, Daniel? Force her to listen? Chain her to a chair and make her hear a story she's already decided is a lie?" "No," he said quietly, "but perhaps it's time to stop hiding. Completely." The suggestion hung in the air between us, electric and terrifying. To step fully into the light after 18 years in shadow, to reclaim my name, my history, my true connection to the university, seemed as impossible as walking on water. "I promised Ava," I whispered. "Ava would want Ellie to know her father," Abraham countered. "The real man, not the caricature she's created in her mind." After we hung up, I sat in the darkness of my trailer for a long time, turning over Abraham's words. Was he right? Had my dedication to Ava's wish become an excuse to hide, to avoid the complexities of being fully seen? The next morning brought no clarity, only a pounding headache and the mundane reality of another day fixing other people's problems, while my own remained broken. I was tightening a valve in the chemistry building's basement when my phone vibrated in my pocket. Unknown number. "Hello?" I answered, voice echoing in the concrete space. "Uncle James?" Travis's voice, slurred and angry. "Your time's up. Actually, it was up 2 weeks ago, but I've been indisposed." My grip tightened on the phone. "What do you want, Travis?" "Same thing I wanted before. Position, degree, recognition." He laughed bitterly. "But you didn't deliver, did you? So I had a little chat with your daughter, not the whole story, just enough to make her ask questions. So it had been Travis who gave Ellie the torn document, who sent her to my door that night with anger and betrayal burning in her eyes. She already hates me," I said quietly. "So you've done your worst." "Not even close." His voice hardened. "She wants to know more, but not from you. That's the beauty of it, Uncle James. She came to me, your precious daughter, looking for the truth about her father from the nephew you've ignored for years." My blood ran cold. The idea of Ellie hearing Travis's twisted version of events colored by his resentment and greed was unbearable. "What did you tell her?" "Not much, yet." I could hear the smile in his voice. "We're meeting for coffee tomorrow. I thought I'd start with the accident at Lake Easton, the real reason you disappeared into this janitor fantasy." "Travis, please," I whispered, leaning against the cold concrete wall for support. "That's not for you to tell. Should have thought of that before you decided to play hero all these years." His voice was bitter with old wounds. "You think you're so noble living in that trailer wearing that uniform, but it's just another kind of vanity, isn't it? Poor St. James sacrificing everything for his daughter. Meanwhile, the rest of us got nothing." "That's not true," I insisted. "Your mother received scraps," he shouted, his voice echoing through my phone. "While you sat on millions, while you built monuments to your own ego and called them charitable donations." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of decades of misunderstanding pressing down on me. "That's not how it was." "Save it," Travis spat. "Tomorrow at noon, I'm meeting Ellie at Riverside Coffee. I'm bringing copies of everything: the accident report, the settlement papers, Aunt Meredith's journals. By the time I'm done, she'll know exactly what kind of man her father really is." The line went dead, leaving me alone in the basement with a half-fixed valve and the knowledge that by this time tomorrow, my daughter would despise me even more than she already did. Not for my silence or my deception, but for the dark truth about what happened that night at Lake Easton in 1996, the night that changed everything. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step heavier than the last. The bright fluorescent lights of the main hallway momentarily blinded me as I emerged from the basement. When my vision cleared, I saw him, Travis, leaning against the wall opposite the stairwell, clearly intoxicated at 10 in the morning. "Thought I'd come see your kingdom," he slurred, gesturing expansively at the hallway. "Not impressed, Uncle James. Not worth what you did." I glanced around, relieved to find the corridor empty between classes. You need to leave, Travis. Now, before security sees you. He pushed off the wall, swaying slightly. Security? You gonna call security on family? He laughed, a harsh sound that bounced off the institutional walls. I'm not the bad guy here. I'm just the only one willing to tell the truth. You don't know the truth, I said quietly, maintaining my distance. You weren't there. But Mom was, wasn't she? She saw everything. His eyes, bloodshot and unfocused, fixed on me with surprising intensity. She wrote it all down, every detail. I took a step toward him, keeping my voice low. Your mother was troubled, Travis. You know that. After Ava died, she wasn't well. What she wrote, don't you dare, he growled, jabbing a finger in my direction. Don't you dare say she was crazy. She was the only one honest enough to write down what really happened. Students were beginning to filter into the hallway, casting curious glances at the disheveled man arguing with the maintenance worker. I needed to get Travis out of there before he created a scene that couldn't be contained. Let's talk somewhere else, I suggested, gesturing toward the exit. Privately. His lip curled in contempt. Why? Afraid someone will overhear the great Whitman secret. Afraid your precious reputation will… Dad? The voice behind me sent ice through my veins. I turned slowly to find Ellie standing there, research binder clutched to her chest, eyes darting between me and Travis with growing suspicion. What's going on? She demanded. Who is this? Travis's face split into a grin that held no warmth. Well, if it isn't little cousin Ellie. We were just talking about you. Cousin? She took a step back, confusion clear on her face. Ellie, this isn't the place, I said quickly, placing myself between them. Please, just… Travis Reynolds, my nephew announced, extending a hand that Ellie didn't take. Your father's sister-in-law's son. The branch of the family tree he'd prefer to forget exists. I watched understanding dawn on Ellie's face. Another piece of the puzzle falling into place, another layer of deception revealed. She looked at me with such raw hurt that I had to turn away. Tomorrow, Travis said to her, as if I weren't standing there. Noon, Riverside coffee. I'll bring everything. Then you'll understand why dear old Dad has been playing janitor all these years. He brushed past me, deliberately bumping my shoulder, and sauntered down the hallway, leaving Ellie and me in a silence that seemed to expand until it filled every corner of the space between us. Do you know what he's talking about? She finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't lie anymore, not to her face. Yes. She nodded once, a quick jerk of her head. Then I guess I'll see you tomorrow. Unless you'd rather keep scrubbing toilets instead of finally telling me the truth. She walked away, back straight, head high, a perfect mirror of her mother in moments of deepest hurt. And I stood there, rooted to the spot, knowing that tomorrow would either heal the chasm between us or widen it beyond all hope of repair. In that moment, I realized I had raised a daughter who hated silence, who thrived on appearance, performance, the need to project strength, who would rather hear an ugly truth than live with a beautiful lie. In that, she was nothing like her mother, and everything like me. Riverside Coffee sat at the edge of campus where the university property met the town, a symbolic bridge between the academic world and the regular lives beyond it. I arrived an hour early, dressed not in my usual maintenance uniform, but in the only decent clothes I owned. A navy blue button-down shirt and khaki pants I kept for parent-teacher conferences when Ellie was younger. The outfit felt strange against my skin, too stiff and formal after years of cotton work clothes softened by countless washes. The cafe was busy with the midday rush, students typing frantically on laptops, professors grading papers, locals reading newspapers. I chose a table in the back corner with a clear view of the door and ordered black coffee that I couldn't bring myself to drink. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. At exactly 11:45, Professor Abraham entered, scanning the room until he spotted me. He nodded once and took a seat at the counter, close enough to intervene if needed, but far enough to give us privacy. We hadn't planned this. His presence was a silent gesture of support that tightened my throat with emotion. At 11:52, Travis pushed through the door. His appearance had improved since yesterday. Hair combed, face shaved, wearing a button-down shirt that still bore creases from the package. Under his arm, he carried a thick manila envelope. Our eyes met briefly before he chose a table on the opposite side of the cafe, deliberately turning his back to me. And at precisely noon, Ellie arrived. She paused in the doorway, her gaze traveling from Travis to me, hesitation clear in the set of her shoulders. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought she might turn and leave. Instead, she straightened her spine and walked directly to my table. "I didn't expect you to actually be here," she said, remaining standing. "I wouldn't miss it," I replied softly. "May I buy you coffee?" A small crease appeared between her eyebrows, so like her mother's expression when puzzling through a difficult problem. "Travis is waiting. Let him wait," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "Before you hear his version of events, I'd like to tell you mine. The full truth, Ellie. No more secrets." She hesitated, then slowly sank into the chair across from me. "Why now? After all these years?" I looked down at my untouched coffee, gathering courage. "Because I was wrong. Your mother asked me to give you a normal childhood, free from the burden of wealth and expectations. But in trying to protect you, I created a different kind of burden. A father you couldn't understand or respect." Across the cafe, Travis shifted impatiently in his seat, checking his watch. I lowered my voice. "There are things in that envelope he's carrying. Police reports, settlement papers, journal entries that will paint a very specific picture. Before you see those, I need you to know the context. The whole story." Ellie glanced at Travis, then back to me. "I'm listening." I took a deep breath and began. "In 1996, I was a different man. Successful, ambitious, running my father's trucking company and expanding it rapidly across 3 states. Your mother was pregnant with you and we were happy, truly happy, despite my long hours and constant travel. The memories flooded back, bittersweet and sharp. One night, I was driving home from a business meeting in Hartford. It was late, raining hard. I took the route along Lake Easton because it was faster, even though the roads were winding and poorly lit. My hands clenched around the coffee cup. A deer jumped into the road. I swerved to avoid it and collided with another car coming around the bend. The impact sent both vehicles through the guardrail and into the lake. Ellie's face had gone pale, but her eyes remained fixed on mine, unwavering. What happened? I managed to get out of my truck as it was sinking, swam to the other car. Inside was a man, Richard Campbell. He was unconscious, bleeding from a head wound. I tried to open his door, but it was jammed. The car was sinking quickly. My voice faltered. I had to make a choice, Ellie. Try to save a stranger who might already be dead, or save myself and by extension you and your mother. I closed my eyes, the memory of dark water closing over metal still vivid after all these years. I chose us. I swam to shore and watched his car disappear beneath the surface. "You let him die," Ellie whispered. Not a question, but a statement. Yes. The word hung between us, heavy with its terrible finality. The official report called it an accident. No charges were filed, but Campbell's family knew. They knew I could have done more. So they sued? No. They were going to, but then something unexpected happened. I met her eyes directly. Campbell's father came to see me. He was a doctor, a good man with a profound understanding of human frailty. He said his son had been drinking that night, that the accident was as much Richard's fault as mine. I took a shaky breath. Instead of a lawsuit, he proposed a different kind of justice. The Campbell family had old money, a foundation that supported educational initiatives. Dr. Campbell asked me to dedicate my life to giving back, to use my business skills to create something that would help young people build better futures. Understanding began to dawn in Ellie's eyes. The university. Yes, the Whitman Institute. Founded with the settlement money from the Campbells and everything I had. Your mother and I sold our house, liquidated our savings. I stepped down from my company and disappeared from my old life completely. But why the janitor act? Why not just run the university openly? That was your mother's idea, I said softly. She believed that true atonement required humility, not public recognition. She worried that if I became the university president, if we lived in a big house on campus and you grew up as the founder's daughter, the whole thing would become about ego rather than service. Ellie's eyes glistened with unshed tears. So instead, we lived in a trailer park. I grew up watching you clean other people's messes, feeling ashamed of my own father. I never wanted you to feel ashamed, I whispered. I wanted you to find your own path, make your own choices, not live in the shadow of what I'd done or the institution I'd built. But I did live in its shadow, she said, voice breaking. I just didn't know it. Across the cafe, Travis had risen from his table, impatience clear in his posture. Ellie glanced at him, then back to me. Why is he so angry? What does he want? Travis believes he deserved a share of the settlement money, that I should have distributed it among family rather than building the university. I sighed. His mother, your Aunt Meredith, struggled after Ava died. I helped them financially for years, but it was never enough. She fed Travis stories about family betrayal, about wealth that should have been theirs. And now he wants to hurt you by turning me against you, Ellie concluded. Yes, but also, he genuinely believes he's been wronged. I hesitated, then added, we all see ourselves as the heroes of our own stories, Ellie, even when we're playing the villain in someone else's. She was quiet for a long moment, absorbing everything. Then, to my surprise, she reached across the table and laid her hand over mine, the first time she'd willingly touched me in years. You don't need to stay for this next part, she said quietly. I'm going to talk to Travis, read whatever he's brought, hear his side. Fear clutched at my heart. Ellie, I need to know everything, Dad. No more secrets, remember? That includes whatever version of events he's carrying in that envelope. I nodded slowly, understanding. She wasn't a child to be protected anymore, but a woman making her own choices. Will you let me know what you decide? About us? The question hung in the air between us, fraught with 18 years of misunderstanding and missed connections. Ellie squeezed my hand once, then released it. Yes, she said simply, and rose from the table. I watched her cross the cafe to where Travis waited, his face lighting with vindictive triumph as she approached. Professor Abraham caught my eye from his seat at the counter and nodded toward the door, a silent suggestion that we leave them to their conversation. With a heavy heart, I followed him outside into the bright May sunshine. You did the right thing, Abraham said as we walked slowly back toward campus. Finally. Did I? I wasn't sure of anything anymore. I just handed my daughter over to a man who hates me, who has every reason to poison her against me forever. You gave her the truth, Abraham corrected. And more importantly, you gave her the respect of making her own judgment. That's the greatest gift a father can offer. We parted ways at the science building, Abraham to his afternoon lecture and I to my maintenance duties. The blue uniform I changed into felt different now. Not a disguise or a penance, but simply work clothes. For the first time in 18 years, I felt the weight of secrecy lifting from my shoulders, regardless of what Ellie might decide. Hours later, as I was closing up the administrative offices for the night, I found a small envelope taped to my locker in the maintenance room. No name, no writing on the outside. With trembling fingers, I opened it and pulled out a crayon drawing, yellow with age, and creased from being folded and unfolded many times. It showed a stick figure man wearing what appeared to be a golden badge standing in front of a building labeled school. In a child's uneven printing, the caption read, "My daddy owns the school." On the back, in Ellie's adult handwriting, were words that blurred before my eyes as tears welled up. Sorry I couldn't see you. I was too busy trying to be seen. I sat on the bench in the empty maintenance room, holding that small drawing as carefully as if it were made of glass. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. A door cracked open after years of standing firmly closed. That night, for the first time since Ava died, I didn't return to an empty trailer. Instead, I drove to the small cemetery on the outskirts of town, to the simple headstone we'd chosen together before she slipped away. I placed my hand on the cool marble and told her everything. About Ellie, about Travis, about the secrets finally spoken aloud. I don't know if I did right by her, I whispered to the silent stone, but I think, maybe, we can start again. The stars spread out above me like diamonds scattered across black velvet, and somewhere in that vast night sky, I felt Ava's gentle forgiveness washing over me like rain. Sometimes the greatest acts of love are invisible to those we cherish most. For 18 years, I wore a blue uniform and carried a toolbox instead of a briefcase, watching my daughter grow from the shadows of the very institution I built. I believed I was giving her the freedom to find her own path, unburdened by wealth or obligation. Instead, I created a chasm between us filled with misunderstanding and shame. What would you have done in my place? Would you have honored a dying wish that slowly poisoned the relationship with your only child? Or would you have chosen a different kind of truth? The hardest lesson I've learned is that silence, however noble its intention, eventually demands its price. Love needs light to grow, the light of honesty, of vulnerability, of being truly seen. When Ellie found that childhood drawing and wrote those words, "Sorry I couldn't see you," I was too busy trying to be seen. I understood that we had both been hiding, She behind her academic achievements and social standing, me behind my maintenance uniform and silent sacrifice. Perhaps the greatest wisdom is knowing when to let go of old promises to make room for new beginnings. If this story touched your heart, remember that it's never too late to bridge the gaps in your own relationships, to speak truths that have gone too long unspoken, to see those who have been invisible to you, to be seen for who you truly are. Thank you for listening to my journey. If you'd like to hear more stories that explore the complicated ways we love and lose and find each other again, please subscribe to this channel, share with someone who might need to hear it, and leave a comment about a time when truth changed everything for you.